She controls more money than every other woman in the world. Cathie Wood, manager of ARKK, $20+ billion worth of investments. And she was recently on My First Million, and she was talking about different aspects around investments, talking about different factors that she likes to focus on. And some of the big lessons I want to bring up that I learned from her, specifically from the dude doing the podcast, doing the interview. I want to cover some of her big errors and some of her big mistakes that she admits to. And then I want to provide my analysis and what that means for you guys. Now, some of the stuff that Cathie talks about right off the bat, and she's looking at what are some of her biggest wins as a business leader. And it's absolutely fantastic. And some of this stuff, I don't think, it's hard for a normal person to sort of put into practice what she's talking about unless you own a company, unless you own a business. I've got a business with 13 people. I have another side business with 6 people. And some of the big factors that we've seen as we've grown to be mid seven figure companies is that we're looking at some of the things Cathie brings up. Okay, so Cathie talks about how they do a lot of internal investigation. They do a lot of analysis of the markets. They're looking at what AI is doing. They're looking at robotics. They're looking at how AI is going to impact medical areas, okay? They're looking at all these different aspects. And then on Fridays, she tends to bring in an outside individual that is in their space, okay? That is in their specific space that they're trying to improve, that they're trying to improve their investigations on. And that helps her think outside the box, okay? So what does this mean for you? If you're a normal person, this is something that I think is invaluable. Over the years, as I went from a 25, 30-year-old to a 40-year-old that now is worth close to $5 million, some of the biggest knowledge gains that I've had are simply based around talking to business owners that are 20, 30 years older than me, who've been there, who've invested money, who've put lots of money into their company, who have failed, who have gone back after they failed, got their feet back under them, and then they keep growing. And the cool part with that is that these people are willing to talk. They're willing to share their insight. They're willing to share their knowledge. You have to be willing to listen. And that's one thing she mentions that I really, really like, is she brings these individuals into her company and she's like, we're just asking questions. We're not trying to relate to them. We're not trying to share our personal insight. We are literally trying to hear what they have to say. And so as a normal person, oftentimes we will try to pitch our situation and then we want to try and relate to their answer instead of saying, okay, Al, what else would you do? Okay, what else would you do here? Okay, what else would you do here? So that's a really, really big lesson. Now, some of the big factors that I think she's an absolute fraud on, okay, is that she gets called out. She gets a real hardball question from the interviewer from My First Million. And he says, over the last 5 to 6 years, you haven't made money, okay? And she had continuously talked about during COVID how they were focused on educating the public, okay, on how to invest properly, on how to handle their investments. So she was saying, we were putting stuff out on X, they were putting stuff out on YouTube, on Instagram even, they were putting stuff out on LinkedIn. And so she was bringing this stuff up. She was continuously saying, hey, we're looking at 5-year time horizons. And if we're looking at a time horizon that is 5 years, and she does say, to her credit, she even mentions if everybody changes their time horizon for money, it can completely change things. Now, the interviewer ends up bringing up, well, you could invest in something like QQQ, the Qs, and you will have much better performance than investing in an ETF like ARKK, which is her ETF. And that's where one of the things that I could bring up immediately is that we could listen to that and say, okay, if we're looking at the Qs, QQQM, something like that, that's going to be a really sound, solid investment. It might be a little risky, but it's a really good ETF. So she starts to say things like, well, yes, over 5 to 6 years, the last 5 to 6 years, we have been underperforming relative to the NASDAQ, okay? she starts to make and speak in these roundabout ways. And you can clearly see she's getting flustered by the fact that this interviewer from My First Million just basically called her out, like, you haven't done what you claim to be doing. And then she starts saying, well, we're putting these things out, and if you look at a longer time horizon, we're doing better than most people can do. And his big thing is, he's like, yeah, but you just said 5 to 6 years is your time horizon. Why wouldn't you be successful? Now, he also ends up bringing up, you mentioned, Cathie, that you were talking about different investments and how a long-term investor should be purchasing something, sitting and holding. So you want to look for really good, strong stocks. Okay. And then he calls her and says, hey, you're trading on a daily basis. You might stay in Tesla, but you sell, then you come back in, you sell, you come back in. You did this with Palantir, you did this with these other ones, instead of just coming into Palantir and holding. And she starts saying, well, we took some of that money and we would go and invest in Coinbase and all these other things. And the argument becomes, this isn't how you should be educating the public if, one, you're not performing well, and we can all see that, and two, you think people should sit and hold. So you're not actually educating like some other individuals would be educating on purchasing an ETF, purchasing a healthy stock. The final part that drives me insane with the shills for Tesla, and I just did a video on what I think about Tesla's balance sheet, what I think about their earnings from this year. I think they have absolutely trash earnings this past year. And she brings up things like robotics and the robo-taxi and self-driving vehicles, autonomous vehicles. And she's talking about how this is going to go from, a $60 billion industry to somewhere in the like 15x, a crazy number that she throws out there. And the interviewer goes, yeah, but if you're looking at Uber, Lyft, Uber Eats, DoorDash, they're not even over $100 billion market yet. So if we're going to replace them, and she's like, well, the thing is with something like Tesla is that you're going to have the robo-taxi, okay? Robo-taxi is going to start to really take off. And she neglects to recognize how far ahead Waymo, how far ahead Google with Waymo, how far ahead Amazon is in the robo-taxi space with autonomous driving. And she neglects to even acknowledge, hey, buy and hold something like Google, which is something that I've done. Buy and hold something like Amazon. Buy and hold something like, does not even mention AMD. Buy and hold something like AMD. Instead, she's shilling Tesla over and over again. And my biggest complaint here is it's such a promotional based stock. There's so many people invested in Tesla, but Google/Waymo continues to embarrass them in the AI race. The robotics race, they're not that big of a player right now. I don't think these things are going to be anything, robotics especially, I think is going to be a lot longer time horizon to see that return. It's going to be longer than a 5-year time horizon. And so when we're listening to this, I'm sitting there going, I'm going through myself. I'm going, okay, if I have SPMO as an ETF, personally, I have SCHD as like a safe conservative play. I have personally Google. I'm not putting any money in Tesla. Google is light years ahead of Tesla with what they're trying to do with autonomous driving. Light years ahead of what they're trying to do with, rivaling a company like Uber or Lyft or DoorDash, something like that. Why are we constantly trying to push this company that really is currently behind on everything? And if you want to listen to what my analysis of the Tesla earnings are, go watch that last video. I really think we've got to start to be careful here because there's such a momentum stock. And I think as somebody who's more of a normal individual, we've got to look for stocks that are valuable. We got to look for ETFs that are proven, and we got to play out for that long haul, long time horizon investing. I just wanted to share that. Cathie Wood, once again, strikes again. And I'm sort of getting sick of it. Peace.